All right. Well, welcome to everyone to tonight's event featuring a astounding Chicago alumna who is joining us from the Windy City this evening. We are thrilled to have everybody joining us this evening. My name is Joshua Prue. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement for the UConn Foundation. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Elissa Kelly, who is our Director of Alumni Relations for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And welcome to all of you who are joining us from the Chicagoland area or anywhere throughout the world in our virtual setting tonight with our fireside chat with alumna Samantha Nugent, who's a alderman for the 39th Ward in Chicago. Joining us as our moderator and our host is Dr. Mohamad Alkadry, Department Chair for the Public Policy Department here at the University of Connecticut. We're thrilled to have both of you joining us this evening, so thank you so much for taking the time. Before we get started, a quick thank you to one of our key Chicago alumni network leaders who helped to make this possible. One of the key connectors out there in Chicago, bringing Huskies together, Mr. Marty Horn. Many of you who are out in the Chicago area know Marty and the connections that he can make. And it's amazing when you're at the gym who you run into wearing the UConn gear, and eventually find them joining us with a virtual event here to kind of let everyone know across UConn Nation what it's like to be in public service. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Alkadry. Actually, I apologize. I'll turn it over to Elissa, who will walk through some of the housekeeping items tonight and give us kind of a heads up of what we can expect.
Great, thanks, Josh. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you to Dr. Alkadry and to the Alderman for joining us for this fireside chat. So as Josh mentioned, I'm going to go over some housekeeping rules real quick so I can see that some of you found the chat already. I hope that you will engage with one another. We're an intimate group here. So I'm just going to ask, let us know where you're joining in from. Are you from the Alderman's ward? Are you joining in from Connecticut? Are you on your couch? Are you snacking on some Garrett's popcorn? Because I wish I was right now. So just let me know where you're at there.
They're all shy this evening.
Yeah, well, thanks, Joel, for joining in, our friends over here. Samantha, Nancy in New York, Watertown. Great. Well, thanks for joining in. So you know where the chat is, but I hope you know where the Q&A is as well. So the end of our program, we're going to have some time for Q&A. Please submit those throughout the program. We will have some time at the end. And if you forget and put it in the chat, Josh and I will be monitoring that and just give you a quick little ping. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Alkadry to get us going.
Well, good evening. My name is Mohamad Alkadry, and I'm a professor of public policy here at the University of Connecticut. It is my pleasure this evening to host a discussion with UConn alumna Samantha Nugent, alderman of the 39th Ward of the city of Chicago. Alderman Nugent is a trained lawyer, active community member, and mother of 3 children. Her professional public service career includes service to the Cook County Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the British Consulate, and former Illinois Attorney General Lisa Madigan. Prior to becoming alderman of the 39th Ward, she worked with partners across government, business, and nonprofit sectors to develop programs that helped communities prepare for and respond to natural and man-made disasters. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from the University of Connecticut, go Huskies, and her Juris Doctor from the Loyola University of Chicago School of Law. In her spare time, Alderman Nugent is a marathon runner, an avid reader, and an interior design enthusiast. She prides herself on her ability to build consensus and get things done, which is an awesome characteristic of any public servant. Alderman Nugent, welcome to our fireside chat.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Alkadry. Thank you, Elissa, Josh, for the lovely introductions, and of course Marty for introducing himself to me at my gym where I was wearing a UConn baseball hat, and that's how we became fast friends. And he was able to connect me to you and the alumni. So it's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. It's nice to connect with folks back home in Connecticut and across the country from the chat room. So thank you.
Well, why don't we start with you giving the audience a little bit of a 101 of the city of Chicago's administration and governance structure.
Sure. So the city of Chicago, we have a city council that is made up of 50 members, and each of us is called an alderman. So as folks have mentioned this evening, I represent the 39th ward. And how we get to these 50 aldermen is you take the population of the city of Chicago, which is roughly 2.7 million, and you divide it by 50. So each 50 of us, each alderman represents about 54,000 people. And we convene as a body politic roughly once a month in city council. We're led by the mayor, who is the Honorable Mayor Lori Lightfoot. And we also have multiple committees in council. We're very much like Congress or a state legislature, right? We have 19 committees. I am on the Public Safety Committee. I'm on the Aviation Committee. I'm the Vice Chair on the Energy and Environment Committee. And as a council, we handle everything from health, safety, welfare, pandemic, emergency response, COVID, every issue you can imagine we handle in the city. We have home rules, so we get to do a whole bunch of things, and that's kind of how we operate. I am about 1 year and 8 months into my first term, and we are elected to 4-year terms as aldermen.
Well, that is, thank you. And so I'm always fascinated by the path that people choose in their careers. And you started off in professional public service as a non-elected official, and then in Homeland Security, emergency management, and the other positions we talked about a few seconds ago. Then you moved into elected office. What drove you to make that career shift?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. I've always sort of been the woman behind the man, or the woman, chief of staff, director of operations, counsel, advanced work for a president. I could tell you what to say and how to do it. I had your briefing book ready. I could tell you what shirt and tie to wear that looked good on TV. And I loved that role. I learned a lot. And I feel like I at least have to give a quick mention that I started in Connecticut working for elected officials, and locally, Senator Dodd and Senator Don Williams, who represented an area right by UConn. I've always felt a draw to public service. I love it. I've always loved government and the study of public policy. And a few years ago, I felt some things shift. As you mentioned in the introduction, I'm a parent. I have 3 children. And something that we always do in my home is at dinner, I make all the kids say, what happened in the world today? It could be anything from, I don't know, the world's largest snowball was created in another country, or, a peace accord was signed, or there was a war, but you have to mention something. And as background noise in my house, usually National Public Radio is on, or a Chicago specific station is WBBM. And around 2016, going into that presidential election, there was language used that I guess I will just classify as what I will call conduct unbecoming. And I felt like my kids could not repeat what they heard on the news at the dinner table. It was offensive to me. And I started really internalizing and thinking, what am I doing here? What kind of example am I for my kids? And I feel very strongly about public service. And I thought, I think I have some value to add here. And I think that I have a history of building relationships and working across party lines and working with different groups, and that I could really move the needle in the right direction. And that's what really prompted me to run for office. I felt the need to do this, and I felt that I had a chance to lead by example. Oop, you're muted.
It wouldn't be a Zoom call if somebody didn't say that.
I know.
As someone who has been welcoming student to public service careers for my entire academic career, I tell prospective students that are interested in public service that you can earn a living while making a difference in your community and for people. I want to ask about what advice you have for students who are considering elected and non-elected public service careers.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you to do it in a heartbeat. I think it's the most rewarding It's the most rewarding career. You make a difference in people's lives every single day, and it can be profitable. It's not gonna earn you the most money of any career that you could choose, but it's rewarding, and it's meaningful, and you can't put a price on that. I've always thought it's a great place to be. I'm always immensely impressed with the people I'm surrounded with. They care deeply, and there's a really incredible talent pool in government. It's fun to work there.
So let me go back to your UConn experience a little bit and ask you about how that has shaped your journey to become a Chicago alderman.
Yeah, my experience at UConn was incredible. I was a poli-sci major, and when I was studying poli-sci at UConn, it was a lot of Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau for those that study government, and that was important to me. I loved learning about that. I also was afforded tremendous opportunities when I was at UConn that I took advantage of. So I began my freshman year in the fall of 1995, which is dating me, but President Clinton came and spoke. I had that opportunity, and that was before I had done advance work for him. So that was, just a glimmer. Like it was an exciting to see a president come to UConn. He was there when Senator Dodd was opening up the school was opening up the Dodd Research Center. I ended up interning for Senator Dodd during that fall semester. I always tried to take advantage of any political opportunities. I did some work with the UConn Dems, the Democrats. I also got to experience, for example, Elie Wiesel came to speak, which was an incredible opportunity that exposed me to his book Night. And, I tried to take advantage of any opportunity I could get at UConn because why wouldn't you, right? It was so incredible. It opened doors for me. It allowed me to learn about different cultures, arts, theater, political opportunities. And contemporaneously, I was always working when I was at UConn. I interned for Senator Dodd, but I also worked for Senator Don Williams. That was just down the street. And Senator May Flexer is now his replacement. May Flexer worked with me for Senator Williams back in the day. So it's so interesting to see what happens to your contemporaries. I would encourage people to take advantage of everything that UConn has to offer, and always be doing something. Even right now during the pandemic, I take interns. You can still get research projects from me over Zoom. I talk with staff like this if we can't be together. UConn was, it was tremendous. I learned so much. And because Connecticut's a smaller state, I was working in the State House. I was driving, to and from the Capitol. I was driving up to Killingly. You have incredible opportunity because the state is smaller and because of the proximity of the campus.
So we're less than a month away from 2021, and many of us are not looking backwards at 2020 as the best year in the world. I mean, this is the year where we saw a pandemic we haven't seen in 100 years. There are many people who are jobless, and many businesses are struggling in this economy. We also have a heightened awareness of the race relations and race and policing questions that have existed for many, many decades, but we're finally coming to deal with that. I'd like to ask you a couple questions about how these compelling crises have impacted your career, your role as a public official. Maybe we can start with the pandemic and how the pandemic has impacted your career.
Yeah. 2020, just let's pause, right? What a year. To the folks that are participating or listening, if everybody it's a tough year. Everybody has struggled. The pandemic, I think, and I kind of want to do a little explaining on the pandemic as it relates to sort of me and how I approached it. So before I was alderman, I was chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security for Cook County, which is the county that the city of Chicago sits in. It's the third largest county in America. And in that role, I was charged with two things. Well, I dealt with two types of disasters: man-made, which unfortunately is like a Unabomber or ISIS or Al Qaeda, or natural disasters, Mother Nature. And in that capacity, we had to prepare for, protect against, respond to, mitigate, and recover from all these things. So in that role, one of the things I had to deal with when I was chief of staff was Ebola. So my mind, and if my staff was chatting with you right now, they would say, I think about disasters and pandemics all the time. And so I came into office kind of with some level of preparedness on how you respond. Now, the fatality rate from something like Ebola is in the 90 percentile. And by no means am I minimizing COVID, but the percentages aren't as high. It has been incredibly difficult to deal with. How we prepared in my office, we were able to be 100% operational remotely the minute the pandemic hit. I was able to be in constant communication with my staff remotely as needed, when we had positive cases in the office. I have a community that has suffered. There was some cases of spread through houses of worship early on, and it really blossomed. We have a really large safety net hospital on the border of my ward. We worked with them. They didn't have ample PPE in the beginning. I have a large manufacturing sector in my ward, and I'm very grateful to them. They retooled their lines. Instead of creating the products they usually create, they started creating masks and PPE, which is a real big collaborative effort. I was immensely proud of them, and I'm grateful for that. Now we continue to do things like delivery to homes, whether it's, we created a program called Neighbors Helping Neighbors, so that if you perhaps you're in a vulnerable population or somebody that shouldn't be out at a store getting medication, we'll get you the groceries. We work with volunteers and other neighbors to get you the services you need, or the prescriptions for a senior population that really just needs care. Like, for example, if they've lost a home health aide due to COVID, we're getting them Meals on Wheels. We've really retooled, and we've been pretty flexible. It's not perfect, but I feel like we've put a really good foot forward. I'm also I think Dr. Awadi, who is our public health commissioner here in the city of Chicago, is by far one of the best infectious disease experts in the country. It's a real privilege to work with her. And so I think we have good leadership here in the city.
How about the economic crisis and how that has that affected what you do?
It's tough. So I think something that's probably similar for most regions in the country, if you didn't get that triple P right away, you were in trouble, because your business, Chicago has some of the stricter, actually, no, I'm talking to folks in Connecticut. You have strict rules too following COVID. And then I think like a Los Angeles and a Chicago, California, pretty strict too. Businesses are hurting. If you didn't get triple P right away, you were in a deficit. Hopefully you got it in the second round. The city of Chicago has released several programs through our Business Affairs and Consumer Protection Division that will help businesses. For example, grants like we have a new grant out for restaurants to apply to if you, if you don't turn more than $3 million a year in profit, you can apply for a $10,000 grant right now. And little things like that. I know they're Band-Aids, they're not perfect. It's not the greatest right now. I'm not gonna lie. I am crossing my fingers and praying that we get a federal stimulus package because I think we're going to need it. And I'm hoping that I don't know officially if I believe it's December 10th and 17th the two vaccines. I think that I'm cautiously optimistic they're going to get approved, and Chicago's on the list to do about 23,000 vaccinations a day. Oh, I believe, according to something I heard today, it costs about $7 a person to give a vaccination. But if we're doing 23,000 a day, I'm looking to the federal government to help us out a little bit here. So it's a long way of saying we need some help.
That's I think that's the case across the whole country.
Yeah.
And we hope that help is on the way.
Yeah.
So Chicago is one of the most diverse cities in the country, and it has one of the largest police forces in the country. And And there's of course diversity has plenty of value, and policing is important and has plenty of value. I want to hear from you on how the post-Floyd era affected policing and policing discourse in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, this has been one of the tougher parts of the year. I would never wish a pandemic on anyone, but I had an idea on how to handle this. So I think that after the murder of George Floyd, which is one of the more horrendous things I think we've ever witnessed as a country, things started to look a lot different, right? We had all these senseless murders. We had George Floyd, we had Mohamad Alkadry, we had Breonna Taylor, and we had a city that was starting to crumble. We had riots here, we had looting, we had all sorts of things, but we also contemporaneously had peaceful protests. This is a difficult topic because people in the city of Chicago and everywhere, they're looking for something that you can just put out in a tweet. It's not that simple. I can't talk about policing until we have to figure out how we end the systemic racism. And if it was super easy, we still wouldn't be trying to figure it out in 2020. We have a ton of work to do there. And I do think we have a police department under Superintendent Brown that is really looking to move the needle in the right direction. The city of Chicago is under a consent decree. That's not something any city is looking to be under. We're under a consent decree because the U.S. Department of Justice didn't think we were doing the right things here. And so we have all these things we have to do to comply with this consent decree. There's something like north of 800 paragraphs, and each paragraph gives a requirement of what you need to do, and then you have to show substantial compliance. I've read this consent decree so many times. I think it's so important that we meet the metrics of the consent decree. If we're doing what the consent decree says, we will truly have a world-class police department. So you hear a lot of things, right? I'll hear from some folks, we want to defund the police, but at the same time, I have a lot of shootings and gang violence that we've had to deal with because some of the tactical teams that used to be working in my neighborhood had to go downtown to protect from the riots. So what we're trying to do, at least in the 39th Ward, is it's a couple of things. I'm not looking to defund the police, but I do think that instances like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Mohamad Alkadry they are completely unacceptable. Okay, so you have these two things. So my ward is well served by 2 police districts in the city. The commanders are fantastic, and those officers are beloved in our community. But policing is just one prong. We also need wraparound services. We have some money and resources are being put into violence interrupters. It's folks that had been that sort of work in and try to work with folks that are sort of involved in gangs and other things to try to offer other paths. We need employment. We need jobs. There's reasons that people turn to sort of career paths. I'm going to use that term in air quotes that probably aren't the best ideas. So there's kind of a bunch of things working together, but it's difficult and it's uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean we should shy away from it. Sometimes you have to get really uncomfortable to get comfortable. So I think you should keep following up with me as we progress on the consent decree. We've made some milestones right now, but for example, Los Angeles, I believe, was under a consent decree for over 10 years. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was roughly 10 years. We've been under the consent decree for about a year and change, and we have made some really good strides.
Well, it wouldn't be an interview with an elected official if I didn't ask a Fauci question, a Dr. Fauci question.
Yeah.
So here's one. We're seeing an unfortunate conflict between professional career officials and elected officials. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that play out over the last few months, I think, especially with the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see your role as an elected official vis-a-vis the unelected career professionals who serve the city? And I think you'll be great at answering that question because you've served in
That's one of them.
capacities, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a word we use for sort of the career government folks. We call them technocrats. I actually read a book on technocrats when I was at UConn. I think sometimes sometimes the pendulum just shifts a little too far. In 2008, apparently the word compromise it was the worst polling word in 2008. That's crazy. We're supposed to compromise. Technocrats are an incredibly important part of government. We need technocrats. People like me, if my constituency says, we really don't like you anymore, Sam, in 2023. If anybody is in my ward on this, please continue to like me in 2023. But, we're out, we're elected, and those technocrats are supposed to be there to give stability. And I respect those folks. I need them in my work. The first people I go and met with, even before I was sworn in, I wanted to meet all the people that were in the respective departments that I was going to be working with to find out, like, how does this work? And, how do you move an ordinance in your committee? And I'm not going to be the first one to say they want to do X, Y, and Z. Tell me why this failed in 88, 92, 96, and 2000. And tell me what you would do. Like, these are supposed to be the people, and we should respect those folks. I think it's, we're draining swamps, we're throwing people out. No, no, I just don't play into that type of banter. I actually think it's really disheartening. I also think folks should be ashamed of themselves if they treat career government officials like that. There is a difference between somebody being so incredibly political and trying to make some type of political statement. That's also inappropriate for a technocrat. But we've seen several people in the last couple of weeks lose their jobs for being a technocrat that an elected official just doesn't enjoy their opinion. Okay. I also thought a few years ago it was pretty disheartening that State Department staff traditionally stay in the State Department for their career, and their institutional knowledge is incredibly important, particularly in conflict zones across the world. It takes a really long time to build trust and establish a rapport and relationships in host countries. And we have a mass exodus in the State Department. We should be very scared for that. And it's my sincere hope and prayer that we can rebuild that. But no, I mean, this is a long answer to your question, Doctor, so I apologize, but it's something I believe very, very strongly in. And I don't always have to agree with folks' opinion who are technocrats, but I respect it. Oh, you're still muted.
And they're the people who keeps things moving as we change elected officials and from one congressional or legislative session to the next. I mean, they're important. Non-elected officials are very important. The technocrats are very important in keeping services, in good shape for citizens and in keeping communities in a good shape. So let me ask you about your priorities for the next five years as an alderman.
Yeah. So a couple things. We got to get through this pandemic, right? And let's pretend that things go well on the 10th and 17th, and we start vaccinating. That's my sincere hope. Hopefully, all that moves in the right direction. We got to talk about how we rebuild the economy. That's going to be huge in my community. My ward looks like a very Picasso-esque drawing of the state of Texas. I have manufacturing. I have 2 colleges. I have forest preserve land. I have industrial corridors. I have shops and restaurants. I have it all. And I have 2 metro stations, which is kind of like Metro North, like what you would take from New Haven to New York City. I have that. And then I have a subway. So I need to rebuild us. I'm trying to work on what economic growth looks like post-COVID. And I think before COVID hit, it was becoming apparent that the traditional shopping mall, which is a place that I hung out at every weekend, you know, my teenage years, that doesn't seem to be the place that it once was. We've moved to a more e-commerce world, but how do we need to figure out how we create community and we create economic growth in this newfangled world. And all COVID did is sort of speed this process up. So for me, it's about how do we rebuild my ward. I am just about 6 miles east of O'Hare Airport, which is one of the busiest airports in the world. So in Chicago's a hub for, you know, just logistics and transportation. So how do we move product? How do we move food, logistical stuff? Like, I think we have a real opportunity to grow there as a city and a region. I'm actually sitting on, the mayor put me on the regional task force to work with the city, county, and the surrounding municipalities on how we do rebuild right now, because it's really important. Tourism, logistics. So the economic build is going to be huge, right? And how we move forward. A couple other issues that I think are incredibly important. We talked, I think, a great deal about public safety in the last question. I'm committed to ensuring that we meet the requirements of the consent decree. It's incredibly important that the police officers have the resources they need to do their job, but the police also have to be engaged and represent the communities they serve, and they have to look like the communities they serve. So, you know, I got to work on those two things contemporaneously. And then environmental issues. This is a really big deal for me. I'm the vice chair on the Energy and Environment Committee. So as I was mentioning, I have some forest preserves and some really beautiful green space in the ward. I've just recently passed an ordinance that protects a really big patch of green space with affordable senior housing on it and a gymnasium and parkland. I have that now as an easement into perpetuity, so nobody could build a shopping mall on it. I'm also looking to combine sort of our environmental goals into the economic component. We can do green build. You know, I think my guess is that the new administration will likely have a Department of Environment again and will rejoin the Paris Agreement. I think, you know, I'm not saying anything that's going to surprise anybody. I believe that the president-elect has mentioned, you know, we'll revisit the Paris Agreement. So I think there's some opportunities for green growth, green jobs, and that sort of hit some of the things that I'm pretty passionate about.
So President-elect Biden has mentioned that he wants to do more. He didn't use the term. He talked about sustainable procurement, right? Using federal spending to incentivize green products and green buildings and you know, and services that pay attention to sustainability questions as well. And that could be just an amazing boost to sustainability and environmental awareness in the country. It'll be growth, I think.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because he's Secretary Kerry is going to be I think it's the environmental climate expert, and it's going to be a cabinet level position. And without having the numbers in front of me, my guess is, think about all the money we spend in these 100-year storms we're having every 2 weeks right now, and you know, whether it's you know, from Florida on up the eastern seaboard with Sandy, and Louisiana keeps getting hit. All the money that we put into these disasters and what it does to families and people, if we did some work on the environmental side, you know, something like the Paris Agreement dealing with temperature control, while incentivizing people and hopefully creating some jobs, I think the return on investment would far exceed what we're paying right now for disaster and emergency response under the FEMA line. But
yeah, there's a lot of public spending in that area. There's also a lot of personal spending, right? I used to live in Miami. My home insurance rate was probably 5 or 6 times what I pay now in Connecticut for a larger place. So
yeah,
you know, we're all paying for that. I think not just through public dollars, but also through our own pocketbooks. Let me ask you a question about family. And in a recent interview, which I heard a couple of days ago, President Obama said that having children and family and having that dinner with them, almost every day, help them be a better president. And I just want to ask about how has being a parent contributed to your outlook on policy and community issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's had nothing but a positive effect. I think any situation that causes you to have empathy or look at situations differently, of course it affects me. I'm a parent. When I look at legislation, I mean, even when I decided to run, I was looking at my kids thinking, is this really the world that I'm raising you in right now? And even when I look at legislation, I think, how will this impact my children? How will this impact your children? My family, a lot of them work in healthcare with seniors and elderly populations. I look at the legislation that we do pertaining to healthcare, COVID response, even affordable housing in my ward. It gives you a degree of empathy that I think is really important. You have to, if you can't picture yourself in the shoes of the person you're attempting to create legislation for, then I just don't think you should be doing the job. I always try to put myself in the situation, in the shoes of the person that I'd be changing their life, and I think it's important.
Well, I'm going to pause for a second and go to Alyssa for a question from the audience.
Thank you. This has been amazing so far. So Joel has a great question that I'm excited to hear the response to. So Alderman, if you could talk us through sort of what is the day in the life of your role? Is there something that you do that defines your role as a public servant, as an alderman, and really, is it as glamorous as Joel imagines it to be?
So it's not all glamour, I can assure you. So a couple things. I run most mornings because I find that everything looks brighter in the morning. I think an email at 9 o'clock at night in all caps, I tend to go, oh no, and maybe want to find it a little tougher to read. A good run in the morning makes it all bearable, and I'm like, oh, I was able to solve it. A day in the life is usually a run. I read about 3 papers before I step out the door to make sure I have an idea what's happening in the world. I talk to my staff, and I'm with my staff all the time. Even during COVID, we've had to Zoom to make it a little different, but we're usually in the field. When people call with constituent issues, whether it's, leaves in their sewers, and we'll go out and take a rake and clean them ourselves, or garbage over a bridge, or recycling didn't come. Recycling didn't come has been a big one lately. Part of that reason is streets. A lot of folks in streets and sanitation are suffering from COVID. We'll go out there and do it. My team and I were raking the other day because somebody was upset about leaves somewhere. We'll end up at restaurants. Sometimes it's an emergency permit. You name it. Sometimes it's shots fired. We had a real uptick in violence probably around August, and it's quieted. We're in December, right around early November, but I was responding to instances of shots fired a lot, which is just the worst. But we also do fun things too. I'm still opening new businesses during a global pandemic. Like, let's pause and think about that. That is incredible. So even in the worst of times, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, as the book says, we're still cutting ribbons. We're still opening businesses. This is still a good place to be. This is still a great city. We're also in the schools. I didn't mention that earlier. I have 1 high school in the ward. I have 7 public schools, 2 Catholic schools, and some other faith-based institutions. I'm with those schools all the time. In August, I've been working really hard. I had an elementary school that was going to be at about 136% over capacity with kids learning in the hallways. It's just unsafe. But we got approved for a $40 million addition. We're going to be building them a new wing. I have another school over in the Albany Park area. They don't have any green space. It's terrible. There's nowhere to play. Through a process called participatory budgeting, we have a $400,000 green space that's going to be built. I just cut a ribbon at Palmer School. They just had a beautiful addition put on. We're in those schools. I'm not an educator by training. I don't pretend to be, but my chief of staff was an educator for 15 years. I lean on her heavily to help me. We talk to the principals all the time, the parent-teacher organizations, and the head of the local school council. Tell me what you need. These schools are like kids, right? They're all different and individual. So it's how we work with them. So that's kind of a day in the life. It's all over the place. Well, you guys it's 8:11 p.m. in Connecticut. It's 7:11 here in Chicago. I do a lot of Zooming. Most nights I'm Zooming.
So it's fascinating to the difference between Connecticut and Illinois or Chicago specifically is just a striking difference. Can you shed some light on what was like what was that like, that just big adjustment?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've worked in different states, sort of in the government arena, in different state houses. I've loved all of it. So the transition from sort of East Coast to the Midwest, it kind of reminds me of that phrase, if you can swim in 2 inches of water, you can swim in 200 feet of water. So Connecticut's, the data I looked at today said you're about 3.5 million people. Chicago's 2.7 million people, and the state of Illinois is like 12.6. So I feel like I got my sea legs in Connecticut, right? It's a little bit smaller, but look, politics, you duke it out in a town council race just the same as in a presidential race, and I've worked on all of them. I think I got good experience in Connecticut, and it taught me how to swim in 200 feet. I got to work for Senator Dodd and Senator Williams. I was in the State House for a couple of years, and I worked for when Ellen Scalatar ran for Secretary of State. You get your sea legs, and I learned how to get out the vote operations and canvassing, and it's no different. I just came here, and it was a much bigger swimming pool. I'm learning how to navigate it all. I love it. I think I have the greatest job in the world. My days are all over the place, but I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of ideas. I think it's good, right? I think this is probably the best job for me to be in, because I can sort of have my hands in a whole bunch of cookie jars. And the good part about having worked in government for a while and sort of having an interesting Rolodex just from sort of a unique career, I always sort of have somebody I can call and say, hey, you worked on this for so-and-so, and how would you do this? Or do you want to partner with me on this? Because sometimes your friends from 20 years ago do some really cool things. I even failed to mention this. I used to work with House Democrats with Chris Murphy, who's now our US Senator in Connecticut. He's a good friend. Like, look where your friends can go and what they can do.
Yeah, that's true. Alyssa?
So I'm going to take one of these questions and make it a little bit broader so that it resonates with our whole audience. So Alderman, can you talk a little bit about the recent budget vote that just happened in Chicago, and maybe just give some general overview for us?
Sure. This was one of the hardest votes. This was the hardest vote for me since I entered City Council. There's just no way to sugarcoat this. You voted, it was a yes or no vote on this budget, and I did vote yes. I supported it. I thought it was the right thing to do. It protected some jobs, and we found over $400 million in savings, but there came a point where we couldn't cut anymore without cutting essential city services like tree trimming and streets and sand and public safety. And this budget also has a tax increase in it. What they did is that the tax increase was tied to CPI, Consumer Price Index. It's capped at being no more than 5%. I believe this year the CPI was like either 1.8 or 2.1, somewhere there. Like, nobody wants to vote for a tax increase, myself included, but we have obligations with pensions. We can't not pay pensions. We are obligated to pay the pensions. We need to give city services. We need to have a balanced budget. That is our job as a city council. And that's why I supported this budget. It protected jobs. It was the right thing to do right now. Now, there's two things though that I think don't get the conversation that deserve to get the conversation. There's criticism of folks that supported the budget saying, you're raising my taxes and you're defunding the police, because it showed that it eliminated about 600 police jobs. I wish I didn't have to raise your taxes right now, but I did. There was no other responsible thing to do in a global pandemic. And I'm going to repeat those two words, global pandemic. In my lifetime, there's never been one of those. And I hope to God after this year, we never have another one. The other thing is, we didn't eliminate 600 plus police jobs. The truth is that the police academy could not fill up because of COVID. With social distancing and all the people getting sick, the academy is unable to fill the class. It was unable to fill it this year, and they're not going to be able to fill it in this coming year because of that. Now, if we get a vaccine, that's all going to change. So did we get some savings in the police line this year? Sure. I'm the first one to tell you, and I've put it out there in writing, that is not something I am looking to have be sustainable. And the minute that we are vaccinated or that we can move forward, I'm working with the mayor and the superintendent to make sure that police academy classes are back up to snuff. So those are two things I think are important. And the third ticker on the budget that I think is incredibly important and why it was the responsible thing to do was we were one of the only cities that did not put in kind of a fake budget line with a federal stimulus. We didn't put in a fake line of we're going to get $1 million, $20 million from the federal government. That's just, that's disingenuous, I think. And I think we did the right thing by being upfront with the residents of the city about the reality of what this global pandemic has done to our economy. We have no tourism revenue. We have nobody, all the places where we traditionally would make money, we can't do it. And so what I do hope is that there's a stimulus package that comes, soon, preferably yesterday. And if not, hopefully, January 20th at 12:01, we can see something there. And then we can potentially check and adjust the budget that we just passed.
So Alyssa, I'm gonna ask one more question before I go back to you. So when we're talking about this COVID vaccine, we're all thrilled that we have a vaccine out there. That hopefully it'll get through the FDA and get approved and start getting distributed. There's a lot of concern about how do we move it from one place to the other. But there's got to be a huge burden of vaccinating 320 million people and millions in the city of Chicago alone. This has got to be a challenge. And how are public officials at the local level, what kind of responsibility do they have in that process?
Sure. So I can speak for Chicago. And I have to say that we have a world-class Department of Public Health. I had the privilege of working with them when I was chief of staff at Homeland. And, we had conversations even today with public health. So what will happen is, at least here, if I actually have my notes from earlier, so I'm going to look down a little just to get it right. But so the EUA, which is the emergency use authorization, on December 10th, that's when Pfizer is up. And then on the 17th is Moderna. Let's just speculate that they both get approved because the way the media is sort of talking, it sounds like it's going to be. So we'll for the sake of this conversation, we'll pretend they get greenlit. So there's something called ACIP. That's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And they set out kind of a list of who should be vaccinated first and how you do it. So here in the city, we would do about 23,000 a day. Our first priorities would be our hospitals, and then our long-term care facilities. So that's how we would do it. When you thaw the vaccine, and we have this already sort of ready to rock and roll, when it's thawed, within 5 days, it has to be used. And then we have a system called iCares in the state. So for example, if I go, let's just say I get it at CVS or Walgreens, right? It's in a system so that if in 25 days or whatever the day is where you go for dose 2, I can go to any other place that's administering it and they'll go into iCare and they'll know. So I'm pretty impressed with how the city is doing this. They're going to probably have like the hospitals in places that it's a logistical operation, really, when you look at it, right? How do we move these people in and out quickly, expedite it, but also make sure they're not using paper. This will all be done online. I wish this was just a one and done vaccine versus going back twice. but this is just the reality of it. And I feel like we are well equipped as a city to administer this. Now, what does concern me is I think that particularly in the Black and brown communities, they're a little leery of this. So we're trying to really make sure that we have good advocates working with the Department of Public Health and folks that are trusted in particular neighborhoods and communities, even faith leaders, because there's some faith groups that are a little nervous as well. We want to make sure that they're seeing that, other folks that they like, love, know, and trust believe this is a good vaccine. But I am quite confident in the city's ability to administer this. Now, I can't speak that way for every other city, state, and municipality, so we'll have to see.
Back to you, Alyssa.
Thank you. So we have Neil tuning in. He says, hi, great talk so far.
Thanks,
So
Neil.
Neil is a resident of the city of Chicago, a business owner, and a CPS parent. He says, as an alderman, you're a legislator and also a mayor. How do you manage those competing interests?
Well, hi, Neil. Thanks for the question. You just, for me, kind of like I said, I go for that run in the morning, and then I look at the list of things that have to get done. I'm not a boil the ocean kind of person. I like scalable goals. I want to know what my takeaways are. I think it's right to set attainable goals. And here's an example of just kind of how I approach stuff. So I'm working very hard on the next recycling contract that goes out for the city folks that are on here, those blue carts. Because I think those blue carts end up where our black carts end, and that's just ridiculous. So I want to make sure that we're actually doing what we say we're going to do. So right now, our recycle rate in the city is about 9%. It's abysmal. But I have folks that come and talk to me and my staff all the time, like, in the next contract, we need this to be at 100%. I can't, that's probably not going to happen. So I have working with a group, the Delta Institute is actually commissioning a study. They do wonderful, it sounds so crazy to say, but they do some of the most wonderful research on garbage that I've ever seen. And they did a great report on Cook County. I thought it was incredible. I'm thrilled the city's working with them on Chicago. So when they come back, they might say, hey, in this next iteration of the contract, you can get to 16%. Well, then let's do it. Because I'd much rather get my staff and myself fired up that, hey, we're going to go from 9 to 16. And this is how we take a bite at the apple every day. And so that's kind of how I approach stuff. Like, I need scalable goals. I need things that I can do, because I just think you've got to be self-motivated to be in this line of work. And I have a responsibility to motivate my staff too. They're incredible. They work super hard and they make me look good, but I have a responsibility to make sure that their goals are attainable too, because that's how you get excited and you want to come to work every day, because you're like, hey, I did something today that moved that needle in the right direction. We're at 9.25% tonight, and we're going to get there someday.
I love that we can geek out a little bit over research on garbage. So another question from the audience. Can you talk a little bit about the challenge of being 1 out of 50? How does the council work, and how can you be successful in this role?
Yeah, it's definitely it's quite a fraternity sorority to be involved in. All you have is your word in this business, and people. That's it. If you go back on your word, you're done. And I think that's where my success has been in my career. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something. If I tell you I'm going to show up, I'm going to show up. I don't pull the old bait and switch, and what you see is what you get. And I always show up as authentic Sam. It's not for everybody, but I've tried to create individual relationships and rapport with my 49 colleagues. I make it a point to call a couple every day and just check in. I think there's speculation, or there's people disagree who came up with the quote, whether it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Katharine Graham. I used to think it was Katharine Graham who started it, and it said, we can disagree without being disagreeable. That's 100% true. I mean, look, if we just had a one-party government system, I wouldn't have a job. You wouldn't need me. And it's okay that we disagree. Compromise, like we were talking earlier, it always was crazy to me that was like the worst polling word in 2008. Like, it's okay. I I don't have to love all the policies you're going to put forward. I can still check in on you and see how your kids are doing and how your mom or dad is doing. And we might not agree on this thing, but we might really both be on the same page on this one. And we might have to find some commonality here. And that's kind of how I show up. And I also, you know, I'm also not, I'm not a clickbait kind of person. You know, it's kind of the world we're in now. And look, a lot of my colleagues do it. They love to tweet and throw things out there, and that's not me. I'm going to research everything. I'm going to read the book on why it's a good thing. I'm going to read the book on why it's a bad thing, because I'm a lawyer too. I want to know where you're going to go, kind of poke holes in my argument. So I try to show up as the one that sort of does the homework, and hopefully when I land on a decision, it's because I put a lot of thought and research into it.
That researching both sides. I had a professor once called the Swiss cheese method. So if you want to go ahead and steal that.
Yes.
So our question from Marty. Hi, Marty.
Marty.
Can you describe what it's like to work with Mayor Lightfoot?
Yeah. You know, I work really well with Mayor Lightfoot. I have a good rapport with her. We don't agree all the time, but that's okay. We don't need to agree all the time. What I can say is my experience with the mayor is anytime I've ever needed to chat with her or seek advice and counsel or discuss an issue in my community, she has always picked up the phone. She has always been there. And that's important to me. You know, I think it's a particularly difficult time to govern. You know, whether or not you're a fan or you weren't a fan of the current president, this was a unique administration. And it's difficult to govern if you're in the opposite party of the president. You need the federal government right now. This is where the federal government has to step up. So I think, you know, she's had unique challenges in her role, but with respect to the 39th Ward and when I've needed her help, she's been there for us. And so I'm grateful for that.
Well, I think we'll just end with one fun question. So hopefully soon, the folks joining in from Connecticut, and I know Josh and I would love to come see you in Chicago. What is the must see or do activity in your ward?
Oh, there's so many. So I know all the Connecticut people are going to say, no way, but we have one of the most famous pizza restaurants in the city, in the 39th Ward. I know, Dr. Alkadry, don't shake your head. It's called Marie's Pizza, and it's really kitschy and quintessential Chicago. It's fantastic. But I also have one of the most beautiful forest preserves in the entire city. I mean, I live in the city, and I can jump on a metro or a train outside my door. I also saw a buck. That's the deer with the things, right? That was galloping down my street yesterday morning. So it's the green space, it's Marie's Pizza. It's also, you know, we have one of the most famous Swedish restaurants in the city called Tre Kroner, 2 great colleges. There's just so many. I don't know.
Thank you. I can't wait till we can come see you in person. So I think Josh is gonna bring us home here.
Well, I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you to both of you, for Dr. Alkadry for leading the discussion today, and for Alderman Nugent for giving us insight into the daily life and the ongoings and challenges that are faced with public service, and especially within one of the largest cities in the country, if not the world, and what really goes into being a public servant, and it's thankless. So our job right now is to thank you for your time and for your efforts and what you do, because it really is. And we appreciate everything that you brought forward with us today. I do want to point out that there was a member of the audience tonight, Alderman Nugent, Sally, who indicated that she too interned with Senator Dodd. So there you go. So now you have some other connections that you can make there. And there was a question here as well for folks looking for Alderman Nugent's biography. If you want to log back into the UConn alumni registration page, you can find that there. And actually, one of the Alderman's staff members is on with us tonight and actually just posted it right there for you. So you can go ahead and click that. And there you go. You got the junior Husky right there.
This is my youngest son, and he's wearing his UConn shirt. This is Lukey. You can say hi to everybody. Well, listen, it was a real pleasure to be here tonight. It's really meaningful to me to be with you guys. UConn played such a valuable role in my life. And also, just a point of personal privilege, some of my roommates from UConn joined in this evening too, as did some of my family from Connecticut. They might not be super interested in Chicago politics, but they're super interested in UConn and a little chance to see me. So to everybody who joined and the folks from Chicago too, it's super exciting. Also, of course, Marty, Dr. Alkadry, Elisa, Josh, just this was great. Pleasure was all mine.
Well, we appreciate it so much, and Dr. Alkadry as well. For those of you that are joining us from the alumni ranks and are interested in further events with UConn Nation, we do have a few things coming down the pike that we want to make sure that you're all aware of. Starting next week, we actually have our 1881 series on the rocks, our virtual mixology class. So Alderman Nugent, I know it's been a tough budget cycle. Maybe we can help you make a couple drinks at night. We're doing that on December 8th. So you can go ahead and sign up online. All the ingredients can be found at your local grocery and liquor store, so you don't have to worry about ordering anything special. We also have the next in our Elevate Career Hacks online career series coming up on December 9th as well, which is tied to wellness in the workplace. We're all working in new norms. You're clearly looking at my home office right now, so you know everything is different, and you know that sometimes you don't take care of yourself because the kitchen's right there. You don't have to walk far to the restroom. All of those things that you'd normally do in separation of home and work, now it's all combined. And we're going to talk to you about some strategies there with some nutritionists, some wellness experts, yoga experts. We have an employee development program assistant who's going to be joining us, all those different things that can help you. And then for those that are interested as well, we have another one of our 1881 series, What's on Tap, which is getting into our alumni that are working in the brewing industry, where we're actually working with the founder of the Black is Beautiful initiative out of Weathered Souls Brewing in San Antonio, Texas, who's going to be joining us with a couple of alums who own breweries right here in Connecticut that are participating in that initiative to bring awareness to social justice through the brewing industry. So if you're interested in that, that is January 20th of next year. And if we don't see you between now and the new year, we wish you all a healthy holiday season for those that celebrate. And for those leading into the new year, Happy New Year to all of you. And we hope to see you in the new year with a vaccine.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. And thank you again to Dr. Alkadry. Thank you, Dr. Alkadry, Alderman Nugent, and to Alderman Nugent's staff. Thank you so much for joining us. Elissa, we'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye.